John Stossel.
Our president has just spoken. He said, if you're here illegally, I'll make you a deal. Here's his deal.
If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you register, pass a criminal background check, pay your fair share of taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily. We're not going to deport you.
Sounds reasonable to me. Some of his speech I liked. 11 million illegals or so now live here in the shadows. That's not good for America. The president said, come out of the shadows, get right with the law. Good. But some parts of his plan give me the creeps. In the speech is pandering to immigrant groups. I've seen your heartbreak, he said. From now on, we're going to deport
felons, not families. Criminals, not children. Gang members, not a mom who's working hard to provide for her kids.
Sounds great. Here to help us make sense of the president's speech, Matt Welch and Camille Foster, co-hosts of The Independents on Fox Business, and Cato Institute immigration specialist Alex Narasta. So, Obama's plan, Matt?
You know, the president, as much as I like a lot more immigration than we currently have, it's not his job to make deals. It's actually Congress's job to make deals. It's his job to enforce the law or to make priorities about enforcing the law. Immigration is the federal government's job, so he does have to make these priorities. He could simply set those priorities. He does not have to make this big, splashy executive order with a whole pitch that is all designed to tell Republicans you should have passed a different law. That's what he did here. So as much as I like the soaring rhetoric, I don't like the fact that a president is making an executive order in contrast against congressional intent, which is what this is.
And most of us don't. But there is precedent, sort of. Clinton, Bush, Reagan all did some sort of executive order around immigration.
But both of the Reagan and the Bush ones, which are the two biggest ones, were harmonious with congressional intent. It was to clean up some language and some ideas at that moment. They weren't done in a petulant act to try to get Congress to change its behavior. That's what this was. Even if I agree with him more than the Congress about the overall question, I'm uncomfortable with the president using the magic wand to do what he wants.
Camille?
Well, I think we can look beyond just the immigration issue. I mean, what's happening here is enforcement discretion, which is something that happens when you have a massive regulatory state. We've actually seen this before, and there are times when libertarians almost universally endorse this sort of thing. When, for example, he's deciding, oh, you know what, this state has actually legalized medical marijuana. Are there federal prohibitions against marijuana? Well, we're not going to enforce those in that particular state. We'll give them the latitude to do that. Granted, it's not completely analogous, but it is certainly true that over the last few years, decades even, we've actually seen presidents resort to this sort of thing more and more often. There are constitutional questions. There's some legal ambiguity that's difficult.
But the executive is in charge of enforcing the laws.
Absolutely.
So he has discretion there.
Absolutely. He's going to have to make some decisions. Look, the president has acknowledged, the administration has acknowledged that they could maybe deport some 400,000 people a year, if I'm not mistaken. There are 11 million people that are here. They can't deport everyone simultaneously.
They've got plane loads going every week.
So setting some priorities and having some specific goals there and focusing narrowly on folks who are actually committing real crimes in this country, not coming here to work and to feed their families, seems appropriate to me.
This is the exact same thing that he said every single year of his administration, that he's going to be prioritizing deportations, that he's going to be focusing on criminals, not splitting up families. But under his administration, your chance of being deported as an illegal immigrant is twice that as it was under the Bush administration. He has been a hardcore enforcer of these immigration laws.
Still pretty low, though, right? Most of the people who are illegal and caught don't get deported.
That's true, but the level of people who are deported each year from the interior of the United States, people who have been here for years, your chances of being deported during Obama's administration is double than what it was under Bush's administration, and he tries to pass himself off as this pro-immigration president. I mean, he had 2 years at the beginning of his administration with Democrats in charge of Congress, and he didn't do anything. And he talks about being compassionate.
He could have worked with his party if they wanted an immigration bill.
He could have, and he talks about this heartbreak that he's seen in these families. A lot of that is as the result of his harsh enforcement practices that he put in place. He is reacting to Obama from 2009, 2010 and 2011. So I see here simply two different presidents trying to argue with each other over the same issue, but it's really the same guy.
And let's think about what was not in the speech tonight. What was not there was talking about the thing that causes illegal immigration. It's not necessarily just illegal immigrants. It's a system that doesn't allow for enough legal immigrants. People always talk about getting in line. Getting in line, it means stay out for the most part, the way our legal immigration system is set up. We treat, and he did it tonight too, we treat illegal immigration like a legality problem. It is not. It is a prohibition problem. When you have more than 10 million people living outside the law, then suddenly it's about time to look and see if that law makes any sense.
The law makes people illegal the way alcohol prohibition made liquor sellers into liquor dealers.
And bad laws actually eviscerate themselves. If we're concerned about the rule of law, creating statutes that are either difficult to obey or completely out of step with the practices of the citizenry, then you're going to undermine the rule of law simply by having these statutes on the books. Absolutely, the president didn't take action when he could. Republicans are just as guilty. This has been a problem for a very long time, and no one has taken serious steps to do this. We can actually look to the last Bush, who did for a moment there talk about instituting a new guest worker program that would have been broad and sweeping and transformative in some respects. And we didn't get that.
And on that point, it was Senator Obama in 2007 who voted against that guest worker visa bill that killed the immigration compromise then. He has never been in favor of a low-skilled guest worker visa bill, and that is the key to solving an illegal immigration problem.
Immigrants he wants, workers not so much.
He wants families. He wants people who will not work and compete with unions. He wants people who aren't workers. That's what he wants, an electorate. He wants people who will vote for him. And that, I can't blame him. He's a politician. I'm not going to be mad at him for doing what's in his nature, but that, I think, is his driving force right here.
And he wants to have it both ways. He said in the middle of the speech that we should have this debate without impugning anyone's motives. And then he's like, so that's why we shouldn't whip up fear, and why Republicans have screwed up every step of the way, and why this is not amnesty. I mean, he tortured the language in this speech. He said, this is not amnesty. The amnesty that we have is what we have right now is amnesty. Well, come on. This is conditional amnesty. It's basically taking people out of the deportation line.
He says critics of this action call it amnesty. Well, it's not.
I mean, how
it is.
It is. It's basically saying we're not going to enforce this law on this group of people. And, those people aren't necessarily going to be citizens. He doesn't have that power. But it is really for those people.
And it's temporary, though. I mean, that's the distinction here. This executive action will only have a temporary effect on these folks. It's not permanent. It puts them into an uncertain position. Better than being illegal, but it's uncertain. Only Congress can make it permanent.
Right away.
It'll begin, I believe, on January 1st of 2015 is when this program begins. Deportation priorities will be set now, but the legalization program will begin in a few months.
Now, this week, a reporter interviewing retiring Senator Tom Coburn asked him this.
What will the Republican reaction be here?
Oh, I don't think it's so much the Republican reaction here. The country's going to go nuts. You could see instances of anarchy.
What do you mean?
Well, you could see violence.
Violence, really? I mean, some Republicans are mad.
You got Camille excited about the anarchy, but then the violence kind of turned him off there. Republicans, part of this deal, I think, and this is cynical, and I'm sorry to be cynical, but the reason why this is an executive order and not just a set of priorities on enforcement is that he wanted to create this political moment that we now have. And part of that is to make Republicans go off on a tizzy. And Republicans, God bless them, they will always take the opportunity to say there's going to be violence and anarchy in the street, talk about impeachment, which we've heard a lot in the last couple of days. They are going to go crazy about this. And I think that is kind of what the president wants, which is not a kind of high statesman-like approach, I don't think.
He also said we need to secure our borders. But that just seems like such political nonsense because we've doubled the Border Patrol. It's impossible to police the borders. Half the illegals come in, not through the borders, not walking across, but they fly here as a tourist or a student and then overstay their visa.
And this is something that he's been a big proponent of for his administration.
Republicans.
Yeah, he and Republicans, but he has actually devoted an enormous amount of resources to beefing up border security during his administration. He's put more people down there, more technology. He's moved enforcement from the interior for the last couple of years to the border to try to stop the inflow. And because of the lousy economy, partly because of enforcement, we see flows that are coming in that are at the lowest levels since the 1970s. And that is the one part where he is unambiguously right about in his speech. The flows of unauthorized immigrants coming across the border are low historically.
But not because of him.
No, because it allows the economy, and now you blame who you want, but for that. But it's also partly because of the enforcement, and we can't say that has nothing to do with it, but it's mainly the economy.
But let's touch back on the good points. Bring illegals into the sunshine. That means they'll pay taxes, they'll start reporting crimes, they'll stop maybe hiding from the police, not living in a criminal underworld where you go into the pipeline to get illegal documents. None of that's good for America.
They do live in a very, very insecure state at this point. The notion that you don't have any legal standing, that you don't have any recourse if your employer violates some contract with you. This is what the president described as actual amnesty. That's some of the tortured language in the speech tonight that one just can't take particularly seriously.
Because what the president wants to do is temporary, you're not going to see the full 4 to 5 million of these folks come forward who could potentially do it. When he did that administrative amnesty in 2012 for the students who were here, only 40% of those who were eligible came forward because they didn't want to give the government all their identity information because it was only temporary. We're going to see the same thing this time.
This brings up an important point. Every federal fix, even if it's an executive action on immigration, bureaucratizes it even more. So come through the shadows, pass a rigorous background check, let's thumbprint
but
this.
They have to, don't they? They got to have rules.
They do have to have rules, but the problem with immigration writ large is that we have all kinds of rules for every single subcategory of immigration. It is a real pain in the posterior if you are a company trying to get someone to wash your dishes or do anything. You have to go through all this process if it's going to be legal. That's because everybody gets all excited about illegal immigration or legal immigrations, and they put these controls over it. So what you're going to find is that people like the black market or the gray market because there's not so many rules out there.
The immigration laws are almost as complicated as the income tax, and if we want people to respect these laws, we need to make them respectable. And the number one way we do that is by liberalizing, by deregulating, and allowing more lawful immigration in the future.
It's totally appropriate to scrutinize sort of the constitutional questions here, but you absolutely have to take a look at the statutes as they stand today, and they are Byzantine. They are impossible to follow, and there is actually no pathway to citizenship for so many of the people here. If you don't have a family member that actually lives in this country, if you're not a high-skilled worker, there isn't anything for you to do.
And even then, it's very difficult. We will continue this discussion in a moment. To join this argument, you at home, please follow me on Twitter at FBN Stossel. Use the hashtag immigration, or like my Facebook page so you can post on my wall. We want to know what you think. For example, on my Facebook page, Rick McCarthy writes, "How is legalizing lawbreakers fair to those waiting to come here legally?" Good question. I'll try to answer that at the end of this show. But Rick, that's a good point. Next, we'll hear from a man who agrees with Rick. He says, what? Let illegals stay? How can you reward lawbreaking? Instead, he says, deport them. We'll debate. Lots of Americans are angry about the executive order President Obama announced tonight. Mark Krikorian is one of them. He's president of the Center for Immigration Studies. That sounds like it just studies things, but it's actually one of the leading groups that opposes immigration. Mark, your website calls this action petulant and unconstitutional. Why?
The president doesn't have the right to make law, because that's what we're talking about here. He's using pretexts in the law, but he is in fact making policy contrary to Congress's wishes. Congress specifically refused to pass the legislation that he demanded, and now he has said explicitly that because Congress didn't do what he wanted, he has the prerogative to do it on his own, and that's.
All right,
I mean, it's outrageous.
I agree with you totally about that, but on your website, your group also says the United States needs fewer immigrants, not more. Why?
A modern society like ours has outgrown immigration. We're not in. This isn't 1914 anymore. We are in a high-tech, post-industrial, knowledge-based economy. We have an extensive welfare state, and technology shrinks the world in such a way that moving from one place to another isn't really as important as it used to be because of communications and what have you.
What about all these companies saying we can't get good workers? What about creating illegality by not letting more people in?
The first point is that the only people you hear from who are saying that there is a shortage of workers are employers. And there's no evidence of that. Wages have been stagnant for everyone in this country except for the most highly educated. And the least educated have seen a decline in wages over the past 30 years, and they're the very ones that are most likely to compete with immigrant labor. So this is baloney that there's jobs Americans won't do and there's a labor shortage. It's just hokum.
Well, we disagree about that. I think we also disagree because you say immigrants are disproportionately criminal.
No, we don't say that, actually. The one report we have on this issue looks at the data, and it's actually ambiguous. Some data shows that immigrants are more likely to be engaged in crime. Other data shows that they're less likely. The one thing we do know for sure is that the children of immigrants are hugely more likely to be involved in crime than the native-born. So the crime issue isn't actually quite as cut and dry as a lot of people think, other than, obviously, all of the immigration-related crimes, ID theft, tax fraud, and the rest of it.
But some of that is because of the law. Here's something the president said tonight that made sense to me.
Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law?
We do have about 11 million people here. Do they never have a chance to get right with the law without going back home?
This is like the person who kills his parents and then in court he begs for mercy because he's an orphan. The reason we have 11 million people here illegally is because of Obama and the other people who agree with him on immigration, who have spent the past 20 years eviscerating our ability to actually control immigration. All of these metrics people point to about how the border is better than it used to be, there's actually something to that. But we have fewer Border Patrol agents than there are police officers in the New York Police Department alone. The NYPD is half again bigger than the entire Border Patrol. We have
we
very
libertarians
little.
would argue the NYPD is too big. The Border Patrol has doubled.
It has doubled, but that's my point. It's doubled, but it's still dramatically smaller than a big city police department. But that's essentially the idea behind the concept of creating illegality. In other words, as some of your guests in the previous segment said, we have to increase legal admissions, and that will eliminate illegal immigration. In a sense, that's true. That's what I mean, to reduce it. In a sense, that's true because if you let in everybody who wants to come here, then there's, by definition, no illegal immigration. But there are hundreds of millions of people abroad who want to come here. There are going to be limits. There have to be limits. And if there are limits, the limits have to be enforced.
I mean, there used to be no limits for the first half of America. People could just come here. If you got here, you could stay. Clearly, I agree, we need limits now. We have a welfare state. We have people trying to kill us. But it's almost...
Even 100 years ago, we had limits. And what those limits were called were oceans. What's changed is that communications and transportation technology has made it such that the distance that we used to have that made it hard and expensive to get here no longer exists. Number two, as President Jack Kennedy wrote in his book, A Nation of Immigrants, we are no longer settling in empty land. We have outgrown mass immigration. It's kind of like when you're a kid. You can eat all the donuts you want. They're probably good for you. When you're 53 like I am, you got to be pretty particular about how many donuts you eat. We are a mature nation, and we don't need any immigration at all. We will allow some for particular reasons, but we need to minimize it.
I disagree. We'll agree to disagree. Thank you, Mark. Next.
Thank you, John.
I like the idea behind the president's executive order, reduce illegality, bring people out of hiding. As Lao Tzu said, the greater the number of laws, the more thieves and robbers there will be. But where does President Obama get off just doing this by executive order? I have the authority, he said. I will make it easier. I will make it faster. But we do have this thing called the Constitution. Doesn't he have to work with Congress? We'll debate that next.
Countdown to the closing bell and after the bell, only on Fox Business Network. your executive order to halt deportation for all 11.5 undocumented immigrants in this country right now. We agree that we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. At the same time, you have a power to stop deportation for all undocumented immigrants.
Actually, I don't. And that's why we're here.
That was this month last year when the president was heckled by immigration activists. He said, "I don't have the power." He went on to say, "I can't violate our laws. I have to follow the democratic process."
Your administration took some steps last year.
In a video chat, this woman asked him, until immigration reform is passed, what's he going to do to prevent families from being broken apart?
The problem is that, I'm the President of the United States. I'm not the Emperor of the United States. My job is to execute laws that are passed.
Well, that was then. Now, apparently, the rules are different. He's emperor. Congress passed no new immigration law. Tonight, however, the president said, the actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every Democratic president for the past half century. And he's sort of right. Other presidents have used executive orders. Ilya Shapiro's a constitutional scholar at the Cato Institute. What about that?
Well, it's not about the use of executive orders or even the use of discretion per se. The immigration laws are actually giving the executive branch really wide discretion in lots of ways. But at a certain point, if the discretion swallows the rule, then either he's acting beyond that limited, that broad discretion of the law, or the law is unconstitutional itself because Congress can't delegate its legislative powers to the president.
Well, what do you think's happening here? Is this against the law?
I think so. I think that legalizing or doing what the president has done for 5 million people, that's too broad a class. However you articulate the line, and I'm not sure I can articulate a line, I think that's on the far side of it. And I say this, unfortunately, because I think I support all of the policies that the president announced. I actually support actual real reform that would go further to liberalizing, to reforming our immigration system.
And congratulations to you. I hear you just became an American citizen after coming here from Russia via Canada.
That's right. And, like most immigrants, I do a job that native-born Americans won't, defending the Constitution.
Well, other presidents have used executive orders on immigration. President Reagan allowed some immigrants legal status, others to remain in the United States to assure family unity. Bush expanded that to encompass spouses and children. Humanitarian protections for Chinese immigrants after Tiananmen Square, Salvadorians at the end of the Salvadorian Civil War. President Clinton deferred departure for Haitians for a year.
President George W. Bush, after Katrina in the Gulf states, deferred action. Absolutely. These are discrete temporary measures, not with a relatively small class of people affected, not this open-ended, sweeping thing that he himself admitted 22 times. You played a couple of clips. There are about 22 times that he said, I can't do this. Apparently, he's invoked the clause of the Constitution that if Congress doesn't act for the first 6 years of the presidential term, the president gets more powers that he previously didn't have. He's really poisoned the well with this action, and unfortunately, I think he's pushed back, made impossible any real legislative reform, and that's the real tragedy here.
Though this abuse of executive orders is not new, Theodore Roosevelt agreed to a Japanese takeover of Korea, a treaty which only the Senate can really approve. Richard Nixon established the war on drugs.
Thomas Jefferson with the Louisiana Purchase. I mean, look, all presidents of both parties historically try to push the envelope, try to expand executive power. That's why we have checks and balances. Congress is supposed to check the president. The courts are supposed to strike down what the president does, as the Supreme Court did to Harry Truman when he tried to seize steel mills in the 50s. So this is kind of a long-term dance, and there's lots of executive violations. Richard Nixon, very famous for all sorts of things doing that way. So, just because people have done bad things in the past doesn't mean that this particular bad thing is then justified.
We'll see how it shakes down. Thank you, Ilya Shapiro. Next, people say immigrants take away American jobs. Some probably will, but I'd argue for every job they take, they create many new jobs, better jobs. We'll debate that next.
I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy, as so many business leaders have proposed.
That was good news from the president tonight, though he wasn't at all specific about it, about what he will do or how many people he would let in. It would be great if more skilled immigrants could bring their cool ideas to America legally. Immigrants like the founder of History.com. He lives in Belgium. He invented a better way to teach history, but he can't legally bring his business here. I reported on that a few months ago.
In Europe, some kids have a new way of learning history.
They're very excited about history, curious. That's what history does for them. It makes them curious.
Sounds good. So why don't we have this in our schools? Probably because the founder of the company that invented the digital learning program is not allowed to work in America. He's Thomas Ketchel, and he's in Belgium now. Why aren't you allowed to work here?
Unfortunately, the H-1B visas, there's a quota, and it's actually very short, and there's not much room for entrepreneurs like me, and there's no startup founder visa either, so we're really quite limited as to how we can get into the country and work.
The B1 visa lets you come here, visit, but you can't work. For that, you need the H-1B, and America accepts applications for that every year on April 1st. But this year, applicants grabbed every available visa within less than a week. So I can see why it's tough for people like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy that, you know, there are companies and lots of founders like me who are coming from Europe and all over the world coming to the US to actually, you know, get their company up and running and get their product out there and actually create jobs for Americans. But we actually just can't. You know, we're stopped at the border, and you know, we have to keep coming back in 3-month stints, and you know, we're not actually allowed to physically work. So it's actually proving very difficult for companies like ours.
Why do you need to be physically in America? Why can't you hire Americans from Belgium? Build your company here from Belgium.
The founder has to be there, at least one of the founders. And it's really important to keep those relations up with the investors from the US, but also, you know, selling to schools and districts. Like, we need one of the founders there at least to conduct business in the US.
Some other countries are much more welcoming to people like you. In Canada, there are all these programs that if you're going to make an investment like you want to do, they let you in. And Canada even put up a billboard in San Francisco. You got a problem getting workers? Come to Canada.
And I think Canada's actually doing pretty well from that.
Canada is. It's the reason Canada's economy is done pretty well. Now, President Obama says he'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants to get in. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Let's go to our Libertarian panel. Matt Welch and Camille Foster of The Independents on Fox Business, and Alex Nowrasteh of the Cato Institute. So that's good news, right?
It's good news. We'll have to see what exactly the details are on this. This has been the bargaining chip forever, the thing that Republicans like to expand immigration. And so Democrats have been reluctant to expand it because they think that way they're never going to get a deal on undocumented people. It's fitting that your interview subject is from Belgium. People don't really realize, but the EU is a big free trade, free movement of people zone. It's no border. You're a Polish plumber, you can move to England and vice versa, all around there. And they have seen incredible gains in prosperity widely shared all throughout the EU because it's basically...
In Europe, they're not doing so well.
They're doing better than they would be if they didn't have this free movement zone. I mean, this is sort of economics 101, and it's not just from having high-skilled workers who are entrepreneurs like that fellow. It's from them coming here with their skills, being workers who work, you know, they work alongside with other Americans, and from just being consumers and buying goods and services from Americans.
Still, you call it Econ 101, and I agree with you, but I would bet most Americans think that even skilled immigrants take away American jobs. Republican Senator Jeff Sessions, who recently called President Obama Emperor of the United States because of his executive orders, says this about allowing more immigrants to work here.
We need to create jobs for Americans first before we bring in foreign workers to take those jobs.
I think most Americans believe that create jobs for Americans first.
It certainly seems true on its face, but the fact is that plenty of immigrants who come here, certainly high-skilled immigrants, there's broad agreement on this. They come here, they invest, they create businesses, they have great ideas, they help to improve the pool of labor. But even low-skilled workers...
Improve the pool of labor? People say, well, they took a job. They took away somebody's job.
Well, they take jobs, but they also buy things here. If we allow them to live here and to buy homes, they're customers as well as workers. But they also start businesses.
They're super entrepreneurial. They're way more entrepreneurial than the average American. I was an illegal immigrant once in Czechoslovakia when I was 22 years old. I was violating that country's laws. I was poor, relatively speaking, and I started a newspaper. I created 35 jobs along with friends. They weren't well paying, but they were actual jobs. People who are coming to a new country will figure it out. They're going to work in between the cracks, and they're going to start hot dog carts, and they're going to start their own kind of things. And
it's worth saying that, I mean, there's broad agreement on high-skilled labor, but that part of this has still not been fixed after all of this time. And even for low-skilled labor, that's been a tremendous question for many Americans. The truth is that often times low-skilled labor is not a substitute for American labor. It is a complement. There are plenty of jobs to go around. Our economy is dynamic. We can, in fact, absorb these people.
Senator Sessions' quote betrayed a central fallacy that a lot of people have about economics, and that is that there is a fixed pie of jobs, and if somebody gets a job, that means that somebody else must have taken it from them. No, the more people there are, the more production possibilities are, the more that businesses can expand, the more they can build, the more that people can buy things. People are good for the economy. In the words of the free market economist Julian Simon, people are the ultimate resource. We are made better off by having more of them who want to contribute, who want to work, and who want to be part of our system. And fortunately, this is one of the small shining parts about what the president has said, the constitutionality aside.
Thank you, Alex, Camille, Matt. Coming up, most of us are not aware how much immigrants have changed our lives. But think about this. Without them, we wouldn't have Google, eBay, Yahoo, YouTube, and well, you'd be surprised at what we wouldn't have. That's coming up next. Tonight, the president said he wants to let more highly skilled immigrants come here legally. Maybe he finally listened to people in business, like my former mayor. I've called him a nanny state tyrant, but this is one point that both he and the president get right.
We are pushing people that other countries want away from our shores, and when they invent the next best thing, the job creation, drugs, the job creation, technologies, the job creation, ideas for service, they're going to be doing it in other countries.
We push inventors away? That's too bad. We want those people creating things here. On the other hand, we've got plenty of American entrepreneurs. Won't they fill the gap? Probably not. Apparently there's something about being an immigrant that makes people think differently and more creatively, and we often benefit from that creativity. It's how we got eBay, Radio Shack, Nordstrom, Sara Lee, Kraft Foods, and so on. All those companies were started by immigrants. We Americans benefit because A, we like their products, and B, those companies create jobs here. Shraddha Agarwal has created more than 100 jobs in America. Your company is Context Media. What do you do?
That's right, John. We partner with physicians across the country to provide educational videos for people living with a chronic condition like diabetes.
The doctor plays these videos in the waiting room, so when they are rudely making us wait, we're subjected to your propaganda.
It does play in the waiting room as well as in the exam room. We actually partner with the physicians to ask them what their patients would benefit from. And these are mostly stories of people living with the condition and how they overcame the challenges through it.
And here's a sample of what people get to watch while waiting to see their doctor.
A cup of coffee may be a good morning pick-me-up for Parkinson's patients. Having high blood pressure makes you more likely to have a stroke, but drinking low-fat milk and eating low-fat cheese and other dairy foods may help bring down high blood pressure.
Okay, I assume that's useful for some people, and according to your research, the average wait time for an appointment in America is 34 minutes. 62% of the patients did discuss the programming with their doctor. 87% of those found it useful, so that's a good thing. But this show is about immigration. What did your coming here from India have to do with your hiring 100 people in America? Why couldn't an American have done it?
Understanding how to solve problems and how to make do with whatever you have, how to be opportunistic and really serve and learn and integrate is a perspective you gain when you're arriving from a new land with new people.
You came here when you were 19. You went to Northwestern University. You must have been scared to leave your country.
Absolutely. It was a really big step arriving at Chicago O'Hare with a bag and a visa to study at Northwestern. But my mom had actually brought us up to really dream big and work hard to make those dreams reality. So it's fortunate that I had the path and the opportunity to come here and learn and contribute.
So why not start a business in India?
The environment in India is a little bit different. The American environment really fosters creativity, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, and it is more willing to try new innovation, new technology, and allow entrepreneurs to solve problems that are more future-looking. This is a culture of meritocracy.
Well, in India, it's more who you know, who your family was.
Absolutely. Here it doesn't really look at where you come from. It looks more at where you're headed and what you want to do to make a difference.
So what do you call yourself now? Are you an Indian or an American?
I'm an Indian American. I have Indian values and I'm from Indian ethnicity, but I have American values which are very similar.
If you had to pick one.
I'm an Indian American. That's what's beautiful about here. You can be American without letting go of where you come from, but you can integrate because everyone in America is from somewhere else. And it's the values, it's the hard work, it's the ethic that makes you American here.
Thank you. Shraddha, coming up, my take. No one should be exempt from the law. That applies to immigrants and to President Obama, too. Is his executive order legal? I doubt it, but I'm not going to spend more time on that tonight. More important to me is that we've now got more than 10 million people living here illegally, hiding, often joining a criminal underworld to get phony paperwork. That's not good for Americans. The president's right to say we need to do something about that, make people legal. But conservatives are right to say, America is a nation of laws. You want to be here? Come here legally. If you're already here and didn't obey the law, go back to your own country and apply for a visa or work permit. Do it legally. America should not reward lawbreaking by doing what the president proposes, just letting you stay. And that's a reasonable argument. Except, what if the immigrant did that? Went back home and told the U.S. Embassy, I'd like to work in America legally. He'd get paperwork to fill out, and he'd go home to wait. And wait. The State Department estimates a computer programmer from India would wait an average 35 years. A high school graduate from Mexico who wants to work here would wait 130 years. We're telling eager workers do it legally, just wait 130 years? I mean, this is nuts. No wonder we have an illegality problem. It's almost impossible to immigrate legally. If we eased the rules, let more people in, we'd have more jobs and less lawbreaking. Heck, even highly skilled people who want to invest big bucks to create jobs in America can't get permission to come here. Canada welcomes them. America loses if the world's brightest entrepreneurs move there instead of here. Immigrants are often special people. The Patent Office says they invent things at twice the rate of native-born Americans. Imagine your life without Google searches, IKEA furniture, YouTube, bicycles, blenders, ATMs. All came from immigrants. So did basketball, football, the first shopping mall, comfortable jeans, even the American hot dog. I hope we let tomorrow's inventors in. Except immigrants, if we do let you in, you ought to wake up and realize this country honors free speech. Ever eat at the restaurant Illegal Pete's? It's a small chain that's been around 20 years, but now it's under fire because of its name. Some activists call that a racial slur. In Time magazine, one says the word illegal is inflammatory and inaccurate. If someone's driving a car at 14, he says they're an underage driver, not an illegal driver. If someone drives under the influence, we call them a drunk driver, not an illegal driver. Congressman Conyers says, I hope no one uses the term illegal immigrants. The Associated Press banned the words. Instead of illegal immigrant, reporters are supposed to say, people in violation of the law. What? Get a grip. If you sneak in here illegally, I may call you an illegal immigrant. America's supposed to be a country with free and open debate. You want extra sensitivity or political correctness? Stay home, if you think you can get it there. But if you want to come here to work and respect the principles that made this country great, please try to come. I'll fight to make the rules more sensible so you can come here legally. If more reasonable numbers of people are allowed to come legally, fewer will sneak in. Then it'll be much easier to secure our border because police can focus on real criminals and terrorists. That's our show. We'll be back next week to report on what economists call the tragedy of the commons. It almost killed Thanksgiving.